Mommy gave me some work to do. I had to boil callaloo, and today is banana. Morning teacher, I'm late for school. I'm sorry to break the rule. Mommy gave me some work to do. I had to boil callaloo, and today is banana day. I just couldn't get away. Up in the Performance Valley, plenty work for school make me.
Me have a tie out to go to Milky Cow
Before I put on me clothes for school, oh.
Look on so much once, I don't know how.
I go finish in time for school, oh.
Me have a carry banana dough, I share.
Before I put on me clothes for school, oh.
Me have a joke so much sleep, I drop there.
Before I put
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this ceremony, the activity that officially commences the 7th meeting of the OECS Council of Ministers of Education, hosted by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. My name is Marlon Anton James, and it's an absolute pleasure serving as Master of Ceremonies this morning. At this point, please stand for the invocation, and I ask that you remain standing for the parade of flags and the anthems. Now for the invocation, here is Jashari Monroe.
Let us pray. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for waking us all up this morning. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity that the ministers, leaders, and decision makers have to meet here today to discuss the matters of OECS education. Lord, as these meetings proceed, I pray that you would bless each and every person involved with the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to make the best decisions for us, the students. Lord, I pray also that they will make decisions that are in alignment with your will and your way. Lord, as the decisions that are made are implemented, I pray that they will be implemented successfully and that they will have a positive impact on each and every person involved. Lord, I pray that you would continue to bless and guide each and every one of us. Bless these proceedings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much, Jashari Monroe, representing the Interschool and College Christian Fellowship. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the parade of flags, beginning with Antigua and Barbuda. Barbuda, one of the founding members of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And now the Commonwealth of Dominica. And we know that Dominica is widely known as the Nature Isle of the Caribbean. And next is the Spice Isle, Grenada. And coming before us now is the flag of Montserrat, another protocol member of the OECS around since inception in 1981. The Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, another founding member of the OECS. member state that hosted the 6th meeting of the OECS Council of Ministers of Education. The British Virgin Islands is next, one of 4 associate members of the OECS. And here comes the flag of Anguilla, publicly registering Anguilla's participation in this year's council meeting of OECS education ministers. We now have Martinique, one of the 2 French-speaking member states. Martinique is followed by Guadeloupe, the 2nd French-speaking member state. And now the flag of host country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who also hosted the 2nd council meeting of OECS education ministers in 2016. And bringing up the rear is the flag of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And I'm sure that you would agree with me that the officers of the Cadet Force executed their task rather meticulously this morning. A round of applause, certainly. Thank you. And now we'd have the 2 anthems, beginning with the national anthem of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, the OECS anthem.
Inspired by a treaty that connects us, and by integration to protect us, excellence will be our guide.
We pushing mediocrity aside, moving on together, forever and ever. To higher heights we'll aspire, for a brighter future. One people, one region, committed to success. Rise and stay up, OECS.
Embracing a Caribbean union, one vision and one common mission, marching on to the same melody,
And preserving peace through prosperity. Moving on together, forever and ever. To higher heights we'll aspire, for a brighter future. One people, one region, committed to success. Rise up, stay up, OECS. The power lies in our people. When we put them first, we win any battle. So let us shout it out with acclamation. May God bless our region. Moving on together, forever and ever. To higher heights we'll aspire, for a brighter future. One people, one region, committed to success. Rise up, stay up, OECS.
Coming from a distant drum since 1981.
Rise up, stay up, OECS.
A beat of a new persuasion, inspired by integration. Oh yes, oh yes.
Rise up, stay up, OECS.
Building capacities for our communities.
Rise up, stay up, OECS. Togetherness is the key for lasting prosperity. Rise up, stay up, OECS.
Please be seated, everyone. At this time, I acknowledge the presence of Minister of Education and National Reconciliation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and incoming Chair, Honorable Curtis King. Minister of Education of St. Lucia and outgoing Chair, Honorable Sean Edward. Other Honorable Ministers of the OECS member states. Director General of the OECS Commission, His Excellency Dr. Didicus Jules. Director of the Human and Social Division of the OECS Commission, Dr. Carleen Radix. Program Director for Education of the OECS Commission, Mrs. Cicera Simon. Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education and National Reconciliation, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Michael Burke. Other permanent secretaries of the Ministries of Education of OECS member states. Chief Education Officers, and I acknowledge the Deputy Chief Education Officer of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Dixon Findley. Directors of Education, Regional and Development Partners. Feature speaker for today, Professor C. Justin Robinson. Heads of departments and senior officials of the Ministries of Education, staff of the OECS Commission, youth representatives, members of the media. Once again, it's really my pleasure to welcome you to this opening session of the 7th meeting of the OECS Council of Ministers of Education. Again, my name is Marlon Anton James, and as Master of Ceremonies, I warmly welcome you to this event. But to deliver the official welcome remarks, I invite the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education and National Reconciliation, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Michael Burke. Please welcome him as he comes.
Minister of Education and National Reconciliation in Vincent and the Grenadines, and incoming Chair, Honorable Curtis King, Minister of Education of St. Lucia and outgoing Chair, Honorable Sean Edward, other Honorable Ministers of OECS member states, Director General of the OECS Commission, His Excellency Dr. Didicus Jules, Director of the Human and Social Division of the OECS Commission, Dr. Carleen Radix, Program Director for Education of the OECS Commission, Mrs. Cicero Simon, Permanent Secretary, I believe that is me. Other Permanent Secretaries of the Ministry of Education of the OECS member states, Chief Education Officers, and of course, I recognize the Deputy Chief Education Officer of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Dixon Finley, Directors of Education, Regional and Developmental Partners, Guest Speaker, Professor C. Justin Robinson, Heads of Department and Senior Officials of the Ministries of Education, staff of the OECS Commission, youth representatives, members of the media, good morning, one and all. Men they have been, ignorant of letters, without art, without eloquence, who yet had the wisdom to devise and the courage to perform that which they lacked language to explain. Such men have worked the deliverance of nations and their own greatness. Their hearts are their books, events are their tutors, great actions are their eloquence. Thomas Macaulay. When elevated learners challenge ordinary men equally, something amazing occurs. Welcome to the 7th OECS Council of Ministers of Education. My task here is a very simple one, and I would reiterate, when elevated learners challenge ordinary men equally, amazing things occur. And if you listen to those words, when W, elevated E, learners L, challenge C, ordinary O, men M, and the final letter E. My task was completed by the opening statement. Welcome to this extraordinary event where we anticipate fruitful discussions would result in gems that will pave a way forward for education. These are indeed extraordinary times that requires extraordinary solutions. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Burke, for your welcome remarks. Now, Vincentians are a very hospitable people, you know. So hospitable that we acknowledge and welcome everyone, even ourselves, as Mr. Burke just did. The next item actually is based on a welcome. It is a piece by some students who will now say, "Come to St. Vincent."
Come to St. Vincent, a friendly welcome awaits you. Renowned for the sun and sea and the best hospitality.
So do not omit it when you visit the West Indies. Come to St. Vincent, a friendly welcome awaits you. Renowned for insolency and the best hospitality. No winter to fear, no smog in the air. Just beautiful sunshine from the clear Caribbean sky. No contamination from poor sanitation. This land is a health resort that nobody can deny. Come to St. Vincent, a very welcome awaits you. Renowned for insolency and the best hospitality. The Grenadine Islands find tourist attraction with waters that they could use to swim all the cares away. The white sandy beaches you shower with praises and take away memories that with you forever will stay. Come to St. Vincent, a friendly welcome awaits you. Renowned for insolency and the best hospitality. The dishes you relish, souvenirs you cherish, and sightseeing tours, most refreshing tropical breeze. Then from the West Indies, take back pleasant memories of your holiday in the gem of the Antilles. Come to St. Vincent, a very welcome awaits you. Renowned for insolency and the best hospitality. See the market vendors, hear the loud street choirs, couples passing by in the cool of the setting sun. Pleasure so inviting, legend so exciting, in this Aruna, lovely island the Caribbean. Come to St. Vincent, a very welcome awaits you. Renowned for insolency and the best hospitality.
Thank you so much to that inter-school dance ensemble for helping us to welcome you to St. Vincent. Come to St. Vincent, albeit virtually. We now move on with remarks by Minister of Education and National Reconciliation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and incoming Chair, Honorable Curtis King.
Thank you very much, Marla. And a pleasant good morning to those listening and those viewing this opening ceremony. Minister of Education of St. Lucia and outgoing Chair, Honorable Sean Edwards, other Honorable Ministers of OECS member states, Director General of the OECS Commission, His Excellency Dr. Didicus Jules, Director of the Human and Social Division of the OECS Commission, Dr. Carleen Radix, Program Director for Education of the OECS Commission, Mrs. Cesara Simon, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education and National Reconciliation, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Michael Burke. Other permanent secretaries of the Ministries of Education of the OECS member states, Chief Education Officers, and I recognize our own Deputy Chief Education Officer of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Dixon Findley. directors of education, I also wish to recognize our feature speaker for this morning, Dr. Justin Robinson from the University of West Indies, Cave Hill. I wish also to recognize the president of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Secondary Schools Association, Mr. Curtis Graves, as well as the president of the Primary Schools Association of Head Teachers, Council of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mrs. Ave Weeks Stevens. Also recognize a member of our local Education Advisory Board, Mr. Games, our cadets who performed so admirably this morning, and of course, to all within the sound of my voice and those viewing. Once again, a pleasant good morning. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our 7th meeting of the OECS Council of Ministers of Education. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is hosting this very important meeting at a critical juncture in the sub-region's campaign for regional integration. Moreover, the meeting is being held at what I believe to be the tail end of the most serious threat to our education systems since we attained independence 40 years ago. I speak of the COVID-19 pandemic and the severe disruption of our education system. The impact of the pandemic has the potential to reverse the post-independence progress that we have collectively made in advancing our education system. Our situation is even more challenging when we consider our vulnerabilities occasioned by the potential for explosive volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, our seasonal weather system that generates storms and hurricanes, and the emerging phenomenon of climate change. Our vulnerabilities make strategies for resilience a way of life rather than the occasion intervention aimed at mitigation. Indeed, the theme for this meeting, Education in Extraordinary Times, from vulnerability to resilience, speaks to the times in which we live and demands from us creativity, cooperation, and collective action to sustain and rethink our education in these extraordinary times. In this context, our meeting will provide a platform for the sub-region's ministers of education and other stakeholders to reflect and exchange ideas on the current state of our education and to strengthen the regional coordinated response to the challenges facing our education. Specifically, the meeting will examine selected key education issues in keeping with the OECS education sector strategy. The meeting will agree to strategies and policies related to advancing education initiatives associated with ongoing implementation of the OECS and response to COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting will also secure the support and collaboration of regional agencies and development partners in advancing education in the OECS. At this meeting, we will share innovative ideas and successful practices that have contributed to educational development at the national level. And finally, and very importantly, at this meeting, we will endorse the OECS Declaration on Education. Finally, our meeting will hear from the next generation of leaders, the youth. 2 students, one from the secondary schools and another from the primary schools, will share their perspectives on their education in these extraordinary times, and make recommendations to the ministers on how to address some of these challenges. It is crucial that the people across the sub-region are made aware of our deliberations, for they too are stakeholders in the respective education systems. We therefore look forward to sharing some of the major outcomes from this meeting with members of the media from across the sub-region on Friday, 18th February. This will be done in a press briefing immediately following the conclusion of our meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, our colonial experience has left us with an education system pregnant with deficits. Deficits in access to, equity, relevance, and quality of our education. We have in the post-independence period, and as it relates to those associate members, over the last 40 years, have worked tirelessly to reduce and remove these deficits. While there is still a lot of work to be done to get us where we want to be, there is no denial that we have made tremendous progress in advancing the education of our people. Let us therefore face these new challenges with confidence in our ability to overcome these challenges. I therefore welcome all the delegations to this very important meeting and ask that you participate fully in the deliberations over the next 2 days. Thank you all for joining us for this crucial meeting. I look forward to fruitful discussions over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
And we thank you very much, Minister King, for your remarks. And in keeping with the theme of this council meeting, which is Education in Extraordinary Times, from Vulnerability to Resilience, I now invite you to view a short film whose message is deeply rooted in resilience.
Hello, boys and girls. Gather round, gather round. It's story time, and our story today is entitled Bouncing Back. Once upon a time, there was a bouncy ball. And do you know what happens when a bouncy ball hits the ground? That's right, it bounces back. And that's because bouncy balls are made of rubber. So, when the ball hits the ground, it flattens, then quickly changes back to its original shape. And this is the motion or change that makes the ball bounce back. And sometimes, boys and girls, things happen in life that make us feel a little flat, like a bouncy ball when it hits the ground. Think about when you feel sad, or mad, or even worried. But just like a bouncy ball, we all can bounce back too. And this ability to bounce back is what we call resilience. You see, boys and girls, sometimes we make mistakes or bad things happen to us. And these things can make us feel upset. Can you imagine that yesterday I spilled paint on my favorite shirt? And don't you feel worried at times when you can't figure out your homework? But hey, we can bounce back from these feelings. Bouncing back isn't always about feeling happy. It's about finding healthy and safe ways to deal with being mad or sad or even worried. Let's look at 4 things you can do to help you bounce back when you're feeling angry or sad or worried. The first thing is to accept your feelings. Sometimes we get mad at ourselves for feeling mad or sad. But all emotions are okay. We all feel them from time to time. When you accept your feelings, you say to yourself, "It's okay, I'm feeling this way." This helps to remind you that all feelings are okay. The second thing is to cool down and calm your brain. Taking a few slow, deep breaths can help to calm our brains down, so we can think more calmly and clearly about what is happening and about how we're feeling. The third thing we should do is talk kindly to ourselves. Because many times when we're feeling angry or frustrated, especially when we think something is hard or isn't going our way, our thoughts can become negative. But we should stay positive. Instead of saying, "This is too hard," we can say, "I can do this." Instead of saying, "This isn't fair," we can say, "Things always work out." You see, boys and girls, thinking positive things really help us to bounce back. And the last thing is to focus on good things. So when you're feeling down, stop and name 3 things that are going right. For example, think about your favorite lunch or snack that you would have today. Think about it, even when everything seems to be going wrong. Some things are going right. There are always things to be thankful for. Okay, boys and girls? Always remember, when things get tough and you feel upset, be resilient, just like a rubber ball, and bounce back.
Bounce back, together we'll rise. A video designed for small children, but there are so many messages embedded in that product that we adults can also use. At this time, it's my pleasure to invite to speak the Director General of the OECS, Dr. Didicus Jules.
Can you hear me, Madam Chair? Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Jules, we're hearing you clearly.
Thank you. Minister of Education of St. Vincent's and the Grenadines and incoming Chair, the Honorable Curtis King. Minister for Education of St. Lucia and outgoing chair, the Honorable Sean Edward, other honorable ministers of OECS member states, feature speaker, Professor Justin Robinson, Director of Human and Social Development Division, Dr. Carleen Radix, Program Director Education, Mrs. Sister Simon, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Michael Burke, other permanent secretaries of the Ministries of Education of the OECS member states, Chief Education Officers, Directors of Education, regional and development partners, heads of departments and senior officials of the Ministries of Education, staff of the OECS Commission, youth and student reps, the media, distinguished colleagues all. The global spread of COVID-19, as we have continually noted, has laid bare our vulnerabilities as a region of small island developing states. The implications are far-reaching and have triggered a fundamental re-engagement of our everyday lives. The pandemic has exposed the inequities and antiquities in our current education system. And only recently, Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves drew attention of the OECS heads of government to what the World Bank has described as the generational catastrophe triggered by the disruption of learning. This pandemic has reminded us that education in the OECS region is severely hampered by traditional notions that do not suit our present-day context. Students need to know that they are being educated for the highly technological world that we live in today, and for the constantly changing environment they will have to adapt to in the future. What is required to shift from vulnerability to resilience in education? There are several key and urgent challenges. Transformation in and of education is critical and is the only pathway to shift us from vulnerability to resilience. For us at the OECS Commission, this connects with the regional priorities that we have set for this new triennium. Reinventing the economy, building resilience, and advancing equity and inclusion. It is necessary, therefore, for us to rethink, reshape, and transform education. We need to lessen our adherence to tradition and experiment with fresh models that explore creativity and reward uniqueness. We need to engage in lateral and design thinking, promote the exception or the extraordinary. Strict adherence to the status quo without reason is a hindrance to true potential. We need to be agile in responding to the evolving threats to our education systems, likewise changing advancements in technology. It is also necessary to reinforce the need for data to guide the decision-making process. The situation is critically reliant on scientific knowledge production as well as data to effectively inform our decisions and our overall governance. The region needs a decisive, strategic approach to address learning loss among students, the generational catastrophe to which we referred earlier. Technology is at the forefront to help us to begin to close that gap, but there needs to be equitable access to technology in education. Of major concern is the need to change the examination-driven culture, which is negatively impacting quality instruction to a more inclusive, relevant, and evidence-based model. And this does not mean doing away with examinations. It simply means making more use of formative assessment in addition to summative assessment. And we are working assiduously on concrete proposals for the consideration of ministers, which, if agreed, will be forwarded to all relevant partners for action. The Declaration of Education referred to by Minister King signals a new approach to education in the OECS, as the region seeks to strengthen its resilience. The OECS Declaration on Education stems from extensive reflection and consultation with stakeholders from across the region to identify a new pathway to systemic learning duly informed by lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I need to emphasize here that this process of consultation critically involved the voices of students, as we will see later. We cannot overemphasize the active involvement of the youth, therefore, in the OECS education transformation. Their role as shapers and owners of their own learning is the key to achieving the results that we seek. Very importantly, the youth voice rings clearly throughout the declaration. This declaration is intended to influence the next iteration of the OECS education sector strategy. We have charged ourselves with the responsibility of breathing life into the declaration in the application of the principles into all education initiatives. It therefore becomes a critical framework for education development and management in the region. It is necessary for member states to nurture this framework as a collective as we continue to build resilience and deliver on the realization of the sustainable development of the member states, as well as achieve the ambitions of the revised Treaty of Bastille. I need to highlight the value of partnerships in implementing relevant educational and indeed all other sector interventions. This close level of interagency collaboration that we have developed exemplifies the Commission's commitment to improving the quality of life of the people of the region. We thank the various regional and development partners, the non-governmental agencies, the private sector agencies, who have deepened collaboration with us in responding to these crises and have extended support over the past few years. Special gratitude and appreciation to the Minister of Education of St. Lucia, the Honorable Sean Edwards, for his support and leadership. We recognize the ease with which he seamlessly assumed the chair from his predecessor in the government of St. Lucia. Not always an easy task for an incoming minister. We recognize and express appreciation to the Minister of Education of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Honorable Curtis King, and his team for hosting the event, the regional and development partners that have invested time, effort, and resources to make this meeting possible. In closing, I wish to accentuate the call for continued partnerships with the OECS Commission in accelerating the regional development agenda. And let me advise too that we have had discussions with some of our development partners about the need for us to work in synergy along the objectives that we have set ourselves. It is counterproductive for us to be duplicating effort across a small region such as ours. These partnerships with ministries of education, regional and development partners, educators, non-development agencies are a testimony to the region's resilience and commitment towards transforming the education landscape to ensure that every learner succeeds. I thank you.
We thank you very much, Dr. Jules, for your remarks. And we're moving nicely along. We're now on to the second item of entertainment, and this is one titled Stay Cool.
Hi, I'm Annalita. I'm Chikiria, and we want you to stay cool. Stay cool, man. Stay cool. This world can be such a scary place with all kind of pressures right up in your face, but stay cool, no man. Stay cool. Corona come upon this blessed island, dengue and a massive volcanic eruption. Then Hurricane Elsa passed by, did some damage, but nobody no die. So stay cool, no man. Stay cool. Cause headache, dizziness, confusion, all kind of negative thought come to hand. Nightmare, cold sweat, trembling hand. Them things just come to wreck me in a man. But stay cool, no man. Stay cool. Stay at home and maintain social distancing. Me can't hang with me friends, what a boring thing. Feel like me hands them tied with without a rope. Relax, stay calm, there is still hope. Stay cool, no man. Stay cool. Take deep breaths, relax. Count 1 to 10. Listen your favorite song and dance to the rhythm. Imagine yourself at your favorite spot, swimming by the beach or cooking a pot, taking a hike, riding a bike, going for a drive to take in the sights. Now when you think of it, it puts a smile on your face. Just take things slowly at your own pace and stay cool now, man. Stay cool. So for your safety, protection, security, follow the instructions, help give to we. Wear your mask, wash your hands, sanitize properly. Keep yourself busy with an activity, family games, exercise. Make sure you attend class, keep your mind sharp. Since school restart, read a book, learn to cook and eat healthy. Corona now fi come stress, all our we fi stay cool no man. Stay cool. Sulfur ash was a plague in so many ways, but it will boost agriculture in future days. Stay cool no man. Stay cool. As a resilient people, our future is bright. Our faith will see us through the darkest of night. Stay cool no man. Stay cool. We face COVID, dengue, volcano and hurricane. The bad flow and all we want send we insane. Stay cool no man. Stay cool. We're rising higher still with mind stronger than steel. Refusing to believe we were given a bad deal. Stay cool no man. Stay cool. Don't you know that the mind is a powerful thing? Be anxious for nothing but pray for everything. Amidst all the trial and tribulation, remember that God still has a plan. Take all your worries to God, you can look. Read the Holy Bible, the bestseller book. Pray for your family, country and school. That will help you to keep calm and stay cool. Stay cool no man. Stay cool. This is only for a time, so just relax your mind. Yes, Corona is a cross, but it not gonna last, so stay cool no man. Stay cool. Stay cool no man. Stay cool.
You look like you really enjoyed that piece. Thanks to the school counselors. Yes, a round of applause. Thanks to the school counselors for their work in preparing it and for really reminding us of the need to preserve our psychosocial well-being in these extraordinary times. At this time, I will present our feature speaker. Professor C. Justin Robinson, a professor of corporate finance, is a national of St. Vincent and the Grenadines who currently serves as Pro-Vice Chancellor and Chair of the Board of Undergraduate Studies of the University of the West Indies. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Management Studies from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill Campus, Barbados, a Master of Science degree in Finance and Econometrics from Florida International University, and a PhD in Finance from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom. Professor Robinson's research interests are capital markets in developing countries, public finance, financial risk management, and corporate finance in developing countries. He currently serves as a director of the Central Bank of Barbados and first vice president of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Professor C. Justin Robinson.
Good morning to all. It gives me immense pleasure to give brief remarks at this important meeting of education ministers in the Eastern Caribbean sub-region. As Pro-Vice Chancellor both for undergraduate studies at the UWI, we take a particular interest in developments in the education sector in the Eastern Caribbean, as the Eastern Caribbean member countries continue to be critical stakeholders in the UWI, a major source of students for us, and a major market for our graduates. As a national of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I also take a personal interest in the developments in education in the Eastern Caribbean. Many of the options I have had in life have been as a result of the educational opportunities afforded to me in St. Vincent and at the UWI. And I take a personal interest in such opportunities being available for persons across the sub-region. As you meet, we are at a critical point in the education sector in the region as we grapple with the challenges posed by the ongoing, ever-evolving COVID-19 pandemic. At the primary, secondary, and university level, a number of our students have been forced to learn in a primarily online mode. There's been much documented by a range of agencies and researchers about the potential for educational deficits, especially among those at the primary and secondary level. And as you deliberate, I'm hoping you can find strategies that we can safely reopen schools across the Eastern Caribbean sub-region and continue to provide these educational services in a safe manner so that we don't risk a lost generation or major educational deficits. As you grapple with these issues, the UWI stands ready to provide any technical or any other assistance that is required, as we have developed quite a bit of experience and competence in this area. As you deliberate, we are also grappling with a rapidly evolving world. We are almost fully into a digital age. Artificial intelligence is upon us. And our education system needs to pivot quite rapidly to produce citizens who are capable of competing, thriving in this new digital age. Again, these are major policy issues that the education system must grapple, as the skills, competencies, and outlook needed for competing in a digital age are in many ways different from those of prior eras, where skills, rather than sometimes specific knowledge and skills or rote learning, becomes less relevant, and creativity, problem solving, adaptability, and also the softer skills that are often neglected in the education system become more important, and our systems need to make these pivots quite rapidly. Especially in our Caribbean area, we confront the challenges of climate change and chronic non-communicable diseases. While these impact all societies, their impact is especially acute in our sub-region. And I think the education system has a critical role in developing citizens who are critically aware of these issues and are able to make the choices and engage in the advocacy needed if the region is to get through and really manage these two major threats, the existential threat of climate change and sustainability, and the challenge of chronic non-communicable diseases. So again, as you enter into your important meetings, I wish you all the best. In the UWI, the Office of the Board of Undergraduate Studies, and in Justin Robinson, you have an open door as a resource that you can call upon that has your back and is willing to provide critical support. So again, all the best.
Thank you so much, Professor Robinson, for first of all agreeing and delivering on the topic. Thank you very much. We now move on with the closing remarks done by Deputy Chief Education Officer Dixon Findley.
Thank you very much, Marla. Minister of Education and National Reconciliation, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, an incoming chair, Honorable Curtis M. King, Minister of Education of St. Lucia, and outgoing chair, Honorable Sean Edward, other honorable ministers of the OECS member states, Director General of the OECS Commission, His Excellency Dr. Didicus Jules, Professor Justin C. Robinson of the UWI, Director of the Human and Social Division of the OECS Commission, Dr. Carleen Radix, Program Director for Education of the OECS Commission, Ms. Cicera Simon, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education and National Reconciliation, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Michael Burke, other permanent secretaries of the Ministries of Education of the OECS member states, Chief Education Officers, Directors of Education, Regional and Development Partners, Heads of Departments and Senior Officials of the Ministries of Education. I recognize President of the Principals Association for Secondary and Primary School, Curtis Graves, and Mrs. Ave Week-Stevens. I also recognize the Director of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College, Mr. Nigel Scott. Staff of the OECS Commission, youth representatives and students, other distinguished guests, members of the media, good morning. My task is a very easy one. I would want to begin by thanking Almighty God for blessing us and keeping us safe during this difficult time. This has been a difficult time for education throughout the world. But we are happy, as the minister, and we're hoping that happens, that we are at the tail end of the pandemic. The mantra of the OECS education strategy is for every learner to succeed. Education is very important to the development of our small economies. And we have to do everything to ensure that the children in the member states are given the best quality education. And we must not allow the pandemic to derail this. I want to thank everyone this morning who would have assisted with this opening ceremony. Special thanks must go to Marla, Nant, and James for doing an excellent job. I would also want to thank Professor Justin Robinson, a son of the soil of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I would want to thank also all of the speakers, including our minister and the Director General of the OECS. Thanks to VC3 and all the other media houses, thanks to the cadets, and thanks to NIS for providing us with a very good facility. I would want to wish the ministers all the best as they deliberate for the next 2 days, and hoping that the decisions that they make will allow all learners in the OECS to succeed. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Findlay, for thanking us all. And folks, this is where we bring the curtains down on the opening ceremony of the 7th meeting of the OECS Council of Ministers of Education, as the ministers now prepare themselves for the business sessions taking place today and tomorrow. I'd like to remind the local representatives of the media here that we'll be right back here at 1:30 on Friday for the press briefing. The regional media will be able to join and make their contribution via Zoom. So, my name is Marlon Anton James, and it has been a pleasure. Have a good day.
Morning teacher, I'm late for school. I'm sorry to break the rule. Mommy gave me some work to do. I had to call Callaloo, and today is banana day. I just couldn't get away. Up in the book of mentally, plenty work for school break me. Me have a tie out to go to milky cow before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, look, I have so much work, I don't know how. I go finish in time for school. Oh, me have a carry banana down a shed before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, me have a drop so much tea and chat beer before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, me live up in Vermont Road, up big cool like dog nose hole. Me just come down the walk. Me live right up in Francois. Me just over number 8, but still me just reach school late. Up in the book of men's valley, too much work for school make me. Me have a tie out to go to milky cow before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, look, I have so much work, I don't know how. I go finish in time for school. Oh, me have a carry banana down a shed before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, me have a drink so much tea and chat beer before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, me have to go carry tea right up over Queensberry. So much washing for me alone. Eating toast on Ravenstone. From Green to Penniston, I drove him up provision. Up in the book of mentally, then easy for school make me. Me have a tie out to go to milky cow before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, look, I have so much work, I don't know how. I go finish in time for school. Oh, me have a carry banana down a shed before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, me have a drink so much tea and chat beer before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, me have to get donkey grass before papi raise on mass. Me have to buy happy limb before mommy pay me send. So teacher don't punish me if I have in school early. Up in the book of men's valley, plenty work for school make me. Me have a tie out to go to milky cow before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, look, I have so much work, I don't know how. I go finish in time for school. Oh, me have a carry banana down a shed before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, me have a drink so much tea and chat beer before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Oh, before I put on me clothes for school. Before I put on me clothes for school. Oh,